Hello and welcome back. Again, I'd like to open by thanking all of you who have taken an interest in my videos over the last few weeks. I'm very encouraged by the support I've been given, and I hope you continue to learn a lot from my videos. As you'll be aware from my second video, the systems are based on sounds rather than letters, as we know it to be in English using the Latin alphabet. So most of the Elvish writing systems have symbols for both T and H, as well as th, as well as other combinations such as C and H and ch. Obviously, because the letters pronounced separately are different to the two letters pronounced collectively. So you remember my example from the last video with the TH example being adulthood and thing. Also, you'll notice the absence of some letters when comparing two or more Elvish alphabets. For example, the letter V may appear in some, whilst not in others. The reason for this is because the language using the alphabet doesn't pronounce this letter. So, for example, if we look at many Indian dialects, we notice that this is the same case because they don't use the letter V. This is therefore the reason why these people substitute the V in an English word with the closest sounding alternative that they do have in their language. This is usually the letter W, as we hear spoken in words such as virus, which would come out wirus. I find the same when speaking to my friends in Eastern Europe when they speak the words with the aforementioned th phoneme, which is often replaced with a Z, resulting in phrases such as what are they doing, or I will do this. But please don't get me started on the colloquial of my own country, the UK, where many people here also replace the TH with either a V or a D, which, well, because that really pisses me off. Anyway, we'll now look at an Elvish writing system, as I know you've all been waiting very patiently to do so. We'll begin by looking at the mode of Beleriand, which was used by the elves in Beleriand to write their language of Sindarin. Anyway, we'll begin with the Beleriand alphabet, as it's the easiest system to comprehend, given that it doesn't use markings for the vowels that other alphabets do, and it also doesn't use any complex consonant clusters. But before we start, I'm going to outline how each system works, including the Beleriand. So, with each system we have 5 things to consider. We have the consonants, which is considered to be the main alphabet. Second, we have the additional lettering. Now, these can include more consonants or phonemes as required by the language, and the amount of additional lettering can vary depending on the language being used. Third is the vowels, which are the same as we know in the Latin alphabet, A, E, I, O, U. Then fourth are the diphthongs. Now, I'll explain the term diphthong in just a moment, but for those of you who don't know, a diphthong is 2 vowels pushed together to form one sound, one syllable. Then finally we have the modifications. Now, these are little rules that apply to mainly to the consonants and additional letters. And these are things like we have in English, for example, when we have the word dumb, we have a silent B. So it's still written, but it's not pronounced. Now, the modifications in Elvish aren't quite so elusive as that in the English language, and are often quite logical. But as I said, we'll come on to those in just a moment. So, we'll begin with point 1, the consonants for the Beleriand mode. First up, we have the T, as in tent, then the P, used in the word pen. Next, the symbol for C, in words such as climb. Now, this isn't to be confused with the K phoneme, which often masquerades as a C in other words, such as cat. Then we come to D, as in dog. Then B, as in beauty. Next is G, as in go, but this is also used for the NG phoneme mentioned in my last video, but only when it appears mid-word, as in the word finger, and not at the end of the word, because there's a separate symbol for this. Next is the th, the th, which we've seen before, and in words such as them or these. Then we have the f phoneme, which can be written using an f or a ph, as we find in phone or find. And then next is the ch, ch, as in chair. Then we have the dh, quite a strange one, spelt dh, and found in words such as dal, and frequently they'll appear at the start of a word. Again, not to be confused with words using separate dh phonemes. Then we have the v, as in voice. Next we have the double n, which in an Elvish tongue has a slightly different sound from the single n phoneme, something which isn't quite so obvious in English. Then we have the corresponding double m. Next is the other ng phoneme, similar to the one above, but this appears, as I said, at the end of a word, such as ring. Next is the single n, as in nose. Then the single m for mother. And finally the w for whiskey. Okay, now some of you might have noticed a pattern in the shape of the letters as I've gone through them, and there's a very logical explanation for this, which I'll explain in my next video. So please make sure you watch this to fully understand how we know to write this lettering. Now we come to the second point of the list, the additional lettering. Now remember, this is exclusive to the Beleriand Tengwa and will differ from those in other alphabets. Okay, so we have the R, as in run, then the RH, as used to pronounce the name Rona. Next is L for Lent, and then the LH, which, although it appears in English words, only do so as two separate phonemes. Next is S, as in simple, then the Y, as in Yankee, not to be confused with the Y, which we find as a vowel in some words, such as funny and symbol. Then we have H, as in house. Then the HW, which again only appears in English as two separate phonemes. And then another, which is the MH phoneme. Okay, moving on to point 3, the vowels, which, as I said earlier, are often represented as markings above the letters in other systems, but in the Beleriand mode, the vowels are given their own exclusive letters. So we have the A for alpha, E as in elephant, I for India, then O for Oscar, and finally U for umbrella. In addition, we have what's called long and short vowels. The long vowels are heard when there is more emphasis put on the sound of the vowel, thus making it a different phoneme. Long vowels can occur anywhere in a word, but once the theory is understood, it's very easy to distinguish between the two. Taking A, for example, apple uses a short A vowel, whilst art uses the long vowel R. To indicate the use of a long vowel in the Beleriand mode, we simply place a marking above the Tengwa for that vowel. So we'll start with the A. So to write apple, we'd use the single Tengwa, but to write art, we'd use the marking above the A Tengwa to signify the change to a long vowel. Next would be the E vowel. So again, to write elephant, we just use the single E, but for the word detail, we'd use the marking. The I vowel we could use in the word igloo for the short example, and then line, I, for the long vowel. Operation for the short O, and open for the long O. And finally, umbrella for the short vowel, for the short U vowel, or university, U, for the long vowel. Okay, next on the list is the diphthongs, which I said are simply two adjacent vowels, which can be found in many words, but a diphthong is not simply two vowels placed together. They must form a particular sound. So the AI diphthong, when spoken, sounds, dare I say it, like, for those of you who know Ali G, he goes I, and can be found in words such as buy or flight. So the sound of the diphthong doesn't always correspond to the letters in the word. For example, the word made, which has got AI in there, it uses the EI diphthong, not the AI, due to the way that it's pronounced made. But the UI is used in the word ruin, so for this example it does match up. A little confusing, but again, I'll go through this in my next video when we speak more of phonemes and pronunciation. So the diphthongs that are used in the Beleriand mode are, first we have the AI, as we know it heard in buy. Next we have the EI, again as we know in the word made. Then we have the UI diphthong in the word ruin. And finally the AU diphthong as heard in cow or loud. Now the final part, the modifications. There are two modifications associated with the Beleriand mode. The first being the preceding nasal, which is found when an M or an N precedes a consonant. Now this is limited to NT, ND, MP and MB. So in English this would apply to words such as don't or damp or hand. Now the marking to signify this is what's known as a tilde, which is a wavy line over the top of the tengwa in place of the N or the M tengwa. So if we look at the words I just mentioned, you'll see how this works. So the second modification is known as the following W. This will apply when a W follows a consonant, and this is applicable to either the D or the G. And this is shown in much the same way as the previous modification, but it uses a bar instead of a tilde. So this results in either DW or GW. One example might be when writing the name Gwen, for example. So that wraps up the Beleriand mode. So use these symbols and follow the rules, and you can write anything using an Elvish orthography. So, just to recap, we have the 5 points to consider with each of the Elvish writing system: the consonants, the additional letters, the vowels, the diphthongs, and finally the modifications. We'll look at other systems in the upcoming videos, but we will always follow these 5 points. In my next video, as you're aware, we'll be looking at the phonemes and the theory behind the pronunciation, which in itself will help you comprehend speaking Elvish as well as writing it. And we'll start this video off with a quick recap of what we've gone through by writing a few phrases using the mode of Beleriand in both English and Elvish. So until then, I wish you all well with your practice and look forward to your follow-up comments and questions. Thanks once again for your support, I really appreciate it, and as always, please continue to get in touch. Okay, cheers, see you next time.